I still remember the exact moment my world shifted, not because something loud happened, not because someone shouted or slammed a door. No, it was quieter than that, almost gentle. A silence so soft that it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. It was the day he walked away from us. Not physically at first, not in some dramatic way you'd see in movies. It was in the pause between his breaths. In the tired way he looked at me, like he was already halfway somewhere else. In the feeling I got in my chest, a feeling I kept trying to ignore. I didn't cry that day. I didn't scream. I didn't beg him to stay. I just stood there, watching the man I had loved for so many years slowly drift into a version of himself I no longer recognized. If I had known what was coming, maybe I would have reached for his hand. Maybe I would have tried to pull him back into the home we had built together, into the memories, the laughter, the children's drawings still taped to the fridge. But I didn't. I didn't understand the weight of that moment until much later. Back then, I honestly believed he was just tired, just stressed, just going through a phase. I didn't know that sometimes the person you trust the most can walk away quietly, so quietly that you only realize it after the door has already closed. And even then, it wasn't the door that hurt. It was the emptiness that followed. That morning had started like any other. The soft clinking of dishes in the kitchen, the sound of our youngest daughter humming to herself as she looked for her missing hair clip, a bit of sunlight pushing through the curtains, landing across the dining table. I was packing the children's lunches while he sat with a cup of tea he didn't touch. His eyes were fixed on the wall, and although I called his name twice, he didn't answer until the third time. When he finally looked at me, there was something heavy in his expression, something tired, but also distant. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled gently and asked if he slept well. He nodded. But I knew he hadn't. For months, I had watched him slowly retreat into himself. Little signs, small changes, a shorter temper, more quiet moments, longer hours away from home, less laughter with the children, less eye contact with me. Love doesn't always disappear in one moment. Sometimes it fades like a photograph left too close to the sun. Still, I held on to hope. Because that's what you do when you've spent years building a life with someone. You hold on, even when your fingers start to ache. That day, as he got ready to leave for work, he stood by the door longer than usual. The children had already run outside to wait for their bus, and it was just the two of us in the hallway. He looked at me with eyes that seemed full of storms, as if he wanted to say something, but the words refused to come out. I whispered, "Are you okay?" He swallowed, nodded again, but I could tell he wasn't. For a moment, it felt like time softened around us, like he was waiting for me to pull him back, like he wanted me to ask him the right question, the one that would open his heart again. But I didn't know what that question was, and so he simply said, "I'll be late tonight." I smiled and told him to take care. He forced a smile back, then he left. The door closed with a soft click. Nothing dramatic, just the sound of an ordinary morning. I didn't know then that our life together was already unraveling, that this day would become one I remembered more clearly than birthdays or anniversaries. Because this was the day he started walking away, even though his footsteps sounded normal. Later that afternoon, while folding laundry, I kept replaying that moment by the door. The way he looked at me, the silence in his eyes, the heaviness in his shoulders. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head. He was a good man, a devoted father, a hard-working husband, someone who used to laugh loudly, who held my hand during storms, who whispered dreams to me on nights when the world felt too big. But people change. Stress changes them. Life changes them. And sometimes love, when unspoken for too long, loses its strength. When the children came home from school, they were full of stories. I listened, smiled, cooked dinner, helped with homework, and kept their small world warm and steady, because that is what mothers do. But a part of me kept glancing at the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for him to walk in, waiting for the warmth of his presence to fill the room. He didn't come home until long after the children were asleep, and even then he moved through the house like a ghost, quiet, avoiding my eyes. Carrying a silence I didn't know how to reach through. I asked how his day was. He said, fine. I asked if he had eaten. He said, I'm not hungry. I asked if he was tired. He said, a little. Then he added, I need some time later to talk. Those words made my heart tighten, because we need to talk is never a comfortable thing to hear, especially when the other person can barely look at you. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time before lying down. I stayed awake for hours, listening to his breathing, wondering what he was holding inside. But I didn't ask. I was afraid of the answer. Sometimes we stay silent because we hope silence will protect us, but silence can break a marriage as deeply as any argument. That night we fell asleep back to back. A small distance between us, but a distance that felt bigger than the room. I didn't know that it was the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to stop, something that would lead to the moment when he finally walked away, right when I needed him the most. But I wasn't ready to see it yet. Back then, I still believed love was enough, that if I just stayed patient, stayed gentle, stayed hopeful, he would find his way back to me. I didn't know that sometimes people get lost in ways we can't guide them out of, that sometimes the person you love chooses a different path, and no amount of love or patience can pull them back. That night, the rain started. A soft, steady drizzle tapping against the windows. I listened to it for a long time. Rain always had a way of making me think. It made everything feel heavier, but also honest, like the sky was crying for the things we refused to cry about. I didn't cry that night. But if I had known what was coming, maybe I would have. Maybe I would have held him a little tighter. Maybe I would have whispered the questions I was too afraid to ask. Maybe I would have told him I needed him. Maybe. But life doesn't give us warnings. It gives us moments, and we only realize their meaning later. And the next morning, the moment that would change everything began quietly, just like all the others. The next morning felt strangely calm, the kind of calm that doesn't comfort you, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath before something changes. I woke up before the alarm, before the children, before the sun had fully risen. The room was dim, washed in that soft blue morning light that makes everything seem colder than it is. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed again, staring at the floor. His back was slightly hunched, his shoulders tight, his hands gripping each other like he was trying to hold himself together. I whispered, "Did you sleep at all?" He didn't answer right away. He just rubbed his eyes and said, "Not much." There was something fragile in his voice, like if I said one wrong thing, he'd break. Or maybe I would. I sat up slowly. I wanted to reach out and touch his back, but my hand stopped halfway, unsure. We weren't touching much these days. Even small gestures felt risky. After a moment, he said, "We'll talk tonight, I promise." Those words made my stomach tighten. I wanted to ask, about what? But the fear kept my mouth closed. Instead, I nodded and said quietly, "Okay." He stood up, walked to the bathroom, and closed the door. Not loudly, just a gentle click. And I sat there, feeling the space he'd left behind like a cold breeze against my skin. The children woke up one by one. I shifted into my usual morning rhythm, brushing hair, packing lunches, tying shoelaces, reminding them not to forget their water bottles. Mothers become experts at pretending everything is fine, even when the ground is shaking beneath them. As always, the children filled the kitchen with noise and laughter. I smiled at their jokes, wiped crumbs off their faces, and listened to their small stories. Stories about classmates, about a funny thing their teacher said, about who got in trouble yesterday. He sat with us for a few minutes. He tried to smile, tried to laugh, tried to be part of the morning, but the smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. Our youngest daughter crawled into his lap, arms around his neck, and said, "Daddy, you're not happy." The words hung in the air, heavier than anything I could have said. He hugged her, kissed her forehead, and said, "I'm just tired, sweetheart." She believed him. Children always believe in the goodness of their parents, even when we stop believing in ourselves. After the bus came and the children ran toward it with their backpacks bouncing behind them, he walked back inside slowly, like his legs were heavy. I watched him gently. He seemed like he was searching for words but couldn't find them. Finally, he exhaled and said, "Please don't worry today." That alone was enough to make me worry more. "What's going on?" I whispered. He looked at me, but his expression was a mixture of guilt and exhaustion. "I'll explain tonight. I need to get through work first." Part of me wanted to insist, to demand answers, to hold him by the arm and say, "Please, don't leave me in this silence." But another part of me, the tired, scared part, simply lowered her eyes and nodded. "All right," I whispered. He gave me a small, sad smile, and then he left. Again, the door closed softly. But this time the silence that followed felt deeper, like the house knew something was shifting. After he left, I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, swept the hallway, organized drawers that didn't need organizing. But every task felt heavy because my mind was somewhere else. Every few minutes I found myself glancing at the door, imagining him returning early, saying, "I'm sorry. It's nothing serious. I just needed a moment." But the door stayed closed. Around noon, the sky turned gray. A light wind brushed past the windows, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't arrived yet. I sat at the dining table with a cup of tea that grew cold. It was the same seat where he had stared at the wall yesterday, the same seat where he had been slipping away from me without saying a single word. I pressed my hands together in my lap, trying to steady my breath. I told myself, "You're strong. You can handle this. He loves you. He's just stressed. He's not the kind of man who leaves." But deep down, a small voice, one I kept trying to silence, said, "Something is wrong. Something is changing and you're not ready for." That afternoon, I picked the children up from school. They were cheerful, still full of their endless stories, still unaware of the quiet storm brewing at home. My son asked if we could make pancakes for dinner. My daughter wanted help with a school project. Another asked if they could sleep in the living room that night, just for fun. Their innocence softened the ache inside me. I nodded. "Maybe," I said softly. "We'll see how the evening goes." Inside, I wondered if the evening would break us apart. As evening approached, the house filled with familiar sounds, the television humming softly, pencils scratching on paper, the kitchen timer ticking as dinner cooked. I kept watching the clock. Each passing minute felt heavier. He was usually home by 6:30 at the latest. At 7, my chest tightened. At 7:30, my hands started to shake. At 8, the children asked where he was. "At work," I whispered, forcing a smile. "He's just late." But the worry in my voice was hard to hide. I tucked the children into bed a little earlier than usual, hoping they wouldn't notice the tension in the air. My eldest daughter asked me quietly, "Are you and Daddy okay?" I paused at her doorway, holding her blanket in my hands. "Yes," I said gently. Just one word. A word that felt more like a hope than an answer. She nodded, trusting me completely. I wished I trusted myself as much as she trusted me. At 9:30, I finally heard the front door open. He entered quietly, removing his shoes without a sound. He looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen him, but there was something else in his eyes too, something resigned. I felt my heart drop. "Can we talk now?" I asked softly. He nodded. For a moment, we stood facing each other in the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. Then he sat down, and I sat across from him. A small coffee table separating us, but it felt like a sea. He rubbed his face with both hands. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice broke on the last word. I leaned forward slightly. "What is it?" I whispered. He looked at me with an expression I will never forget, a mixture of sorrow, guilt, and something like fear. And for the first time, I knew, whatever he was about to say, it would change everything. Before he spoke, he looked around the house, at the toys in the corner, at the family photos on the wall, at the little shoes lined up by the door. His eyes lingered on everything we had built together. Then he looked back at me, and he said, "There's something I've been hiding from you." My breath stopped. He continued, "I didn't want to hurt you. I've been trying to figure it out on my own. But I'm not sure I can." His hands trembled as he spoke. He wasn't a man who trembled easily. I whispered, "Please, just tell me." He swallowed hard. Then he said words that made my world tilt. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." The air left my lungs. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in. He kept going. "I love you. I love the kids. But I feel lost, and I don't know how to fix it." I stared at him, unable to breathe. He whispered, "I don't know if I can stay." And just like that, a quiet sentence, spoken softly, my world began to crack. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. His words were still hanging in the air, echoing in a part of my mind that refused to accept them. I don't know if I can stay. Everything inside me went quiet, not the kind of quiet that brings peace, the kind that comes before a storm, when the whole world holds itself still. I looked at him, really looked at him. His shoulders were trembling. His eyes were glassy. His hands were clasped together so tightly that his knuckles looked pale. This wasn't the man who used to lift our children into the air and laugh until he couldn't breathe. This wasn't the man who held my hand during difficult nights, whispering that we would get through anything as long as we were together. This was someone who looked like he'd been standing at the edge of something dark for far too long. I whispered, "You don't want to be with us?" He shook his head quickly. "No, it's not that. Please don't think that." His voice cracked. "It's not that I don't love you or the kids. I do. More than anything." "Then why?" My voice was barely audible. He opened his mouth, closed it, and sighed deeply. "I feel like I'm drowning," he said. "And every day I wake up, it takes everything in me just to get out of bed." My chest tightened. Pain, confusion, fear, they all tangled together. "You should have told me," I whispered. "You should have talked to me." He looked down. "I didn't want to burden you. You already do so much. And I didn't want you to think I failed." I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I pushed them back. "You're not failing by asking for help," I said softly. "You're failing by keeping it all inside." He nodded slowly, guilt flooding his face. "I know," he whispered. "And I'm sorry." We sat in silence for several seconds, the kind of silence that sits heavy between two people who used to understand each other without words. Finally, I asked, "So, what are you saying? What do you want to do? He hesitated. His fingers tapped nervously against his knee. I think, he swallowed. I think I need space. That word, space, felt like a sharp blade, sliding between the ribs quietly but painfully. Space? I repeated. For how long? I don't know, he said. That's the truth. I really don't know. I stared at him. A man I loved. A man I shared a home, a life, children with. You're saying you want to leave. He inhaled sharply. I'm saying I need to step back before I fall apart completely. His voice softened. And I don't want the kids to see me like that. A tear slipped down my cheek, despite my attempts to hold everything in. They need you, I whispered. We need you. He closed his eyes, as if those words hurt him deeply. I know, he said. That's why this is so hard. He stood up suddenly, unable to sit still any longer. He walked toward the window, staring out into the dark street. Outside, a soft drizzle had started again, tiny droplets sliding down the glass, blurring everything beyond it. When did this start? I asked quietly from behind him. He didn't turn around. A while ago, he admitted. I've been feeling empty, like I can't breathe, like I'm failing at everything. His voice was a hushed confession. And instead of talking to you, I tried to pretend I was fine. I thought it would go away. He let out a bitter laugh. It didn't. I walked toward him slowly. You're not alone, I said. You shouldn't have been carrying this by yourself. He sighed. I know, His voice cracked again. I didn't want to disappoint you. I felt my heart soften a little at that, even through the pain. You've never disappointed me, I whispered. He turned then, and his eyes were full of tears he was trying hard not to let fall. I think I already have, he said quietly. We stood there, inches apart. Two people still connected by love, but separated by something deeper than distance. I reached out and placed my hand on his arm, a gentle touch, hoping it would pull him back. He looked down at my hand. For a moment, he didn't move. Then very slowly, he covered my hand with his. But instead of drawing closer, he whispered, I'm scared. I nodded softly. So am I. He swallowed hard. But I can't ignore what I'm feeling anymore. Then he said something that made my breath stop. I feel like I'm disappearing, and if I stay while I'm like this, I'm afraid I'll hurt all of you. We sat back down. There was no anger, no shouting, just two people sitting in a quiet room, hearts breaking in slow motion. I asked him, Are you sure leaving is the answer? He took a long time before responding. I don't know if it's the answer, he said honestly. But I know I need to step away long enough to understand what's happening inside me. And what about us? I whispered. He closed his eyes. I want to believe we'll be okay. I want to believe I'll come back stronger. But right now, I can't promise you anything. His honesty cut through me like cold wind. I don't want promises, I said softly. I want you to stay. He looked at me, pain etched into every part of his face. I want to want that, he whispered, but I don't know if I can. When the children ran outside to wait for the bus, he and I were alone. The house grew achingly silent. He stood near the counter, fingers drumming lightly on the edge, a nervous habit he rarely had before I leaned against the doorway, unsure where to look. Finally, I spoke. Do you really have to go? He closed his eyes. Yes, he said softly. If I stay like this, I'm afraid I'll fall apart in front of them. And me? I whispered. He hesitated. That's what I'm trying to protect you from, he said. I can't give you the version of me you deserve right now. His words felt like a gentle wound, the kind that doesn't bleed, but hurts deep inside. I asked, Is there someone else? He looked up sharply. No, never. Don't think that. His voice was firm, honest. I'm not running to someone, I'm running from myself. I breathed out slowly, relief and sorrow mixing in my chest. Do you think leaving will fix what's inside you? I asked. I don't know, he admitted, but staying while I'm lost like this, it feels unfair to all of you. His eyes softened. And I need to figure out who I am again. The saddest part was knowing he wasn't lying. Sometimes the truth hurts worse than betrayal. The bus honked outside. The children rushed inside one last time to grab forgotten lunchboxes. He knelt to their height. His voice was warm, gentle. I love you so much, he said. You're my whole world. They hugged him again, quickly, lightly, innocently. Then they ran back out the door, laughing. He stood up slowly, watching them until the bus disappeared. And then he whispered, I'm not sure I deserve them. He said it so quietly, I almost missed it. I reached for his arm. You do, I said softly. You always have. He looked at the floor. Maybe one day I'll believe that. When the house was empty again, he walked to the living room and picked up the small bag he had packed, a plain black duffel. Not much inside, just the basics for a man who didn't know how long he'd be gone. I walked with him to the door. It felt surreal, like watching someone pack for a trip they didn't want to take. At the doorway, he paused. I need you to believe me, he whispered. This isn't your fault. Tears gathered in my eyes. I know, I said, but my voice shook. He pulled me into a hug, a tight, aching hug that felt like both an apology and a goodbye. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I wanted time to freeze right there, but he pulled away gently. I'll call tonight, he said, after I settle in. I nodded. He hesitated one last time. His eyes traveled along the walls, the photos, the staircase. Then he stepped outside. The air felt colder instantly. He lifted his hand a little as if to wave, but dropped it before fully raising it. Then he walked to his car. I watched him start the engine, watched him keep his hands on the steering wheel for a long moment, staring straight ahead. And then he drove away. Not fast, not slow, just enough to take him out of our street and out of the world we shared. I stood there until he disappeared. My breath was shaking, my hands trembling. When I finally stepped back inside, the door felt heavier than usual. I closed it gently, leaning my forehead against the wood. And in that moment, with the quiet house behind me and the cold door against my skin, I whispered to no one, I needed you today. It was the first time I allowed myself to say it, but it wouldn't be the last. Because he wasn't just leaving the house. He was leaving at a moment when life was about to test me in a way I had never imagined, a way that would make me realize how deeply his absence cut. He had left to save himself. But I would soon learn that I needed saving too, and he wouldn't be there when everything fell apart. The first week without him felt strange, like walking through a house that belonged to someone else. Nothing looked different, but everything felt different, heavier, quieter, unsteady. I kept expecting to hear his keys drop onto the table, his footsteps in the hallway, his voice calling the kids to dinner. Habit has a way of lingering long after the person is gone. He called that first night, and the next. Short calls, soft calls, calls with long pauses and sentences that didn't know how to end. "Are you okay?" he would ask. "I'm managing." "Are the kids all right?" "They miss you." He always inhaled sharply at that part, as if love itself was painful. But on the seventh night, he didn't call. No message, no missed call, no reason. I tried to convince myself he was busy or tired or simply forgot, but a sinking feeling settled in my stomach, a heaviness I recognized too well. I had been left before, by life, by people, by promises. This sensation, this quiet dread, was familiar. I went to bed with that heaviness sitting on my chest. The next morning, the kids were louder than usual, arguing over cereal bowls, missing socks, and who got to sit in front of the TV. Normally, he would step in, calm them, make some silly joke to break the tension. But the moment they realized I was already running late, they tried to keep the peace on their own. Little shoulders carrying little worries. "Mom, it's okay," my oldest said gently. "You don't have to rush." But I did. I had work. I had bills. I had everything. I drove them to school with tired eyes and a trembling hand. I told them to have a good day. I smiled the way you smile when smiling is expected. Then I pulled away, parked down the street, and cried so quietly the windows didn't even fog. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the exhaustion of pretending everything was manageable. That evening, life delivered its next blow. I had just finished folding laundry when a sharp pain cut down my side. Deep, sudden, crippling. I gasped and dropped the clothes. The room blurred. It wasn't the ordinary ache I'd been carrying for weeks. It was something else. Something that made my breath hitch and my hand clutch the wall for support. The pain spread, tightening and pulsing like a fist closing inside me. I sat down quickly, pressing my palm against my ribs. "Not now," I whispered, but the pain didn't listen. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time twisted strangely. I tried standing again, but my legs trembled beneath me. My phone was on the counter, 5 steps away, 5 impossible steps. I crawled. The floor was cold beneath my palms. Every movement sent another wave of pain through my body. By the time I reached the counter, tears blurred the screen. I wasn't sure who to call. Family was distant. Friends had their own lives. Neighbors barely knew us. And then I thought of him. I hesitated. He had left to save himself, to escape burdens, to breathe again. Calling him would drag him back into the place where he felt lost. But as another wave of pain ripped through me, I pressed his name. The call rang once, twice, 3 times. And then, "Your call has been forwarded." I hung up immediately, pressing my lips together to stop the sob that tried to escape. It wasn't rejection. I kept telling myself that. It was timing, bad timing. But it didn't matter. I was alone. I called my neighbor instead, a woman I barely spoke to except for polite greetings at the mailbox. She answered immediately. By the time she reached my door, I was drenched in sweat and shaking. She helped me to the car. She spoke calmly even though her hands trembled on the steering wheel. When we reached the hospital, the world spun so violently that I had to close my eyes as they wheeled me inside. I remember the cold of the stretcher, the bright lights, the nurse's gentle voice telling me to breathe. Then everything went dark. When I woke up again, the room was dim. A small lamp glowed near the bed, and the steady beep of a monitor filled the silence. I blinked, confused. Where were the kids? Where was... I turned my head slowly. My neighbor sat in a chair, dozing lightly, her jacket draped over her knees. The moment she sensed movement, she straightened. "You're awake," she whispered. "Thank goodness." Her voice trembled with relief. I swallowed, wincing at the soreness. "What happened?" She sighed softly. "You collapsed. They said it was severe dehydration, stress, and a possible infection that's been getting worse for days." Stress. Of course. The body always tells the truth long before the heart is ready to admit it. I asked about the children, and she assured me they were with her husband and eating dinner. I exhaled shakily. Then, with hesitation, I asked the question I already feared the answer to. "Did he call?" She looked at me with sympathy, a look that told me everything. "No," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." The room felt colder. I nodded slowly, though the breath in my chest felt thin. I looked down at my hands, pale, trembling, empty. "He left me when I needed him most," I whispered. It was the first time I said it aloud to someone else. The neighbor reached out and covered my hand with hers, warm, steady, human. "You don't have to go through this alone," she said. Her kindness cracked something in me, because that was exactly what I had been doing. Pretending, hiding, surviving quietly. But pain has a way of revealing the truth. I had been alone long before he drove away. I just hadn't admitted it. The doctor returned later and told me I needed to stay overnight for observation. I nodded, exhausted. When he left, I stared at the ceiling for a long while. The room was silent. My phone lay on the bedside table, still no missed calls, no messages. After everything, he still didn't reach out. And for the first time, the ache in my chest shifted from grief to something heavier. Understanding. Understanding the difference between someone who can't show up and someone who chooses not to. I turned my head slowly toward the window, where the night sky pressed softly against the glass, and I whispered to myself, "I have to learn how to stand without him." The words trembled, but they were true. The breaking point wasn't the moment he left. It was this, the moment I realized I couldn't wait for him to return, not to save me, not to hold me up, not to fix the pieces that shattered when life struck hard. I would have to rise alone, even if he had been the one I always believed would catch me. The morning after the hospital stay felt strangely gentle. Soft daylight filtered through the curtains, warming the room in a way that reminded me of childhood mornings. Quiet, slow, almost forgiving. My body still ached, but the sharp pain was gone. What remained was a deeper kind of ache, the kind that settles in the soul, not the skin. A nurse checked my temperature and smiled kindly. "You're recovering," she said. "You just pushed yourself too far for too long. Too far for too long." Her words lingered long after she walked out. I realized then that I had been living like someone running on memories, pushing, holding, pretending, hoping that if I stayed strong enough, he would come back and notice. But healing doesn't start with someone returning. Healing often begins with admitting they might never return at all. My neighbor returned mid-morning with the kids. They rushed into the room, and their little arms wrapped around me so tightly that for a moment the world softened again. "Mom, are you okay? Why did you fall? Did it hurt?" I answered each question gently, brushing their hair back, kissing their foreheads. They didn't need the whole truth. Not yet. They simply needed reassurance. When my neighbor and I stepped out into the hallway, away from small ears, she asked quietly, "Are you ready to talk about what happened?" I was tired, emotionally drained, physically weak, but I nodded. And for the first time in weeks, I spoke honestly, not in defended sentences or half-truths, not as a woman trying to appear strong, but as myself. I told her everything: the tension, the distance, the day he left, the night he didn't call. I told her about the moment I realized he wasn't just lost. He had chosen a path that led away from us. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything. She simply stood there, steady and quiet, the way people do when they understand heartbreak. "You've been carrying too much," she said softly. "No one can hold all of that alone." Her words cracked something open inside me, gently, but undeniably. Because she was right. I had been trying to carry a marriage, a family, a house, and the weight of his absence, all while pretending I wasn't breaking. But I was, and I had. When they discharged me, the kids held my hands as if afraid I might disappear again. My neighbor helped us home and stayed long enough to make lunch, start laundry, and sweep the floor. It was the first time in years that someone cared for me without expecting anything in return. Kindness can feel foreign when you've gotten used to surviving alone. That evening, the house was quiet. I expected my heart to ache the way it always did, that familiar emptiness that crept in after sunset. But something was different. Maybe it was the calm after exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that I was still here, still breathing, still moving. Or maybe it was the way my children leaned against me as we watched old cartoons, as if my presence alone made them feel safe again. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to understand that healing was not betrayal, and moving forward wasn't forgetting. Later that night, after the kids fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table alone, the same table where he once drank his morning coffee, where we once planned birthdays, where we once shared dreams. Now, only the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the air. I opened my phone and looked at our last messages. His final words were simple: "I need time." I had reread those words countless times, trying to decode them, trying to understand the shape of his leaving. But sitting there, in the quiet hum of the kitchen, something shifted. "I need time" didn't mean "I'll come back." And suddenly, that truth didn't feel like a knife anymore. It felt like a door closing gently instead of being slammed shut. I set the phone down, and for the first time, I didn't wait for it to light up with his name. The next day, the kids returned to school, and my neighbor checked in again. She brought over homemade soup, a small gesture that warmed the entire house. "You'll get through this," she said. "Not because you have to, but because you already started." And she was right. Without meaning to, I had started. Healing begins in small, quiet ways, like eating a full meal, asking for help, or simply waking up with a little less fear than the day before. I took slow walks around the neighborhood. I sat on the porch with a blanket and a warm cup of tea. I read stories to the kids with a softer voice. I practiced breathing, long, slow, steady breaths. Some moments hurt more than others, like when I saw his jacket still hanging in the closet, or his toothbrush still sitting by the sink, or the half-open drawer where he kept his favorite shirts. But I didn't hide from the pain anymore. I acknowledged it. I let it sit with me for a while, and then I let it pass, gently, like a wave. Healing is not sudden. It comes in halves and quarters and fragments, and that was okay. One evening, 2 weeks after the hospital stay, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. My heart jolted the way it always did. That old reflex, that old hope. But I didn't answer immediately. I sat with the moment. I let myself feel the emotions, not to obey them, but to understand them. Then slowly, I pressed accept. "Hello?" I said softly. His voice came through, familiar, hesitant. "I heard you were in the hospital." So he knew. I took a breath. "A neighbor helped," I said. "I'm doing better now." There was a long silence. Too long. "I'm sorry," he said finally. I didn't know what to do. I needed to clear my head. Clear his head. While mine was spinning. While my body collapsed. While our life kept moving without him. But I didn't say any of that. I simply said, "I understand." Because I did truly. People run from things that overwhelm them. People leave when they don't know how to stay. People step away to protect themselves, even when it hurts the ones they love. Understanding doesn't erase the hurt, but it softens its edges. "I'll check in again tomorrow," he said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "Good night," I whispered. "Good night." When the call ended, I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't fall apart. Instead, I exhaled, slow and steady, not relief, not pain, peace, small, tentative peace. Because now I wasn't drifting in uncertainty. I wasn't waiting blindly. I wasn't trying to hold together something that was already unraveling. I was learning to breathe in the quiet he once filled. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like possibility. The days following that phone call carried a different kind of quiet. Not empty, not lonely, just still. A stillness I didn't recognize at first, a stillness that asked me to feel, to listen, to face the things I'd been avoiding. It was strange how silence could reveal parts of yourself that noise once covered. Every morning, after the kids left for school, the house settled into a calm rhythm. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of cars, the soft tap of branches against the window. For years, I had filled these moments with tasks and worry and movement. But now, I allowed myself to sit, to breathe, to exist without performing strength. One morning, I made tea and sat by the window where the sunlight warmed the wooden floor. It felt good, simple, grounding. I looked around the room and realized something surprising. I wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. I wasn't afraid of being alone with my thoughts. For so long, I had feared that if I stopped moving, the pain would catch up. But instead, when I stopped, something gentler caught up with me. Myself. A week passed before he called again. This time I didn't jump to answer. I let it ring twice, not to punish him, but to steady my heart. "Hello?" "Hey. How are you?" His voice was quieter than before, almost fragile. "I'm okay," I said softly. "Are the kids okay?" "They're doing well." Another silence, the kind that stretches into meaning. Then he said something I wasn't expecting, something that made me sit a little straighter. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "and I'm not sure I deserve to come back." I closed my eyes, absorbing his words. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't promising change. He was admitting something raw and human. "I'm not sure I deserve to come back." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't seen before. He wasn't the villain in my story. He was a man drowning in his own fears, unable to reach for the very hand that could have saved him. "I don't know what the future looks like," I said gently, "but I'm taking things one day at a time." He exhaled shakily. "I'm glad you're okay," he whispered. "I really am." The call ended without resolution, but it left behind a strange, bittersweet warmth. Sometimes, the softest closure comes from hearing the truth you were never given before. Around that time, Small changes began happening, little signs that healing wasn't far away. I started opening the curtains more, letting sunlight in, letting life in. I cleaned his side of the closet, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. Each folded shirt felt like a quiet goodbye, not final, not bitter, just respectful. I took the kids to the park more often. Their laughter had always been loud, but now I noticed how healing that sound truly was. Sometimes our youngest would ask, "Is Dad coming home?" And instead of promising tomorrow or guessing at answers I didn't have, I simply said, "I don't know yet, but we're okay today." And that became our new rhythm. We lived one honest day at a time. One evening, my oldest sat beside me at the kitchen table while I graded papers for work. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. You seem different." I looked at him, surprised. "Different how?" He shrugged the way older children do when they're trying to be careful with their words. "You smile more," he said, "and you breathe slower." I didn't realize tears had filled my eyes until he leaned his head on my shoulder. "You're getting better," he whispered. His words were simple, but they were powerful. Children always see what adults hide. They notice the small changes, the ones we don't even notice ourselves. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him close. "Thank you," I whispered, "for noticing." He nodded, as if that were the most natural thing in the world, because to him, it was. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I received a message from his sister, a woman who had always been kind, always gentle, always caught in the space between loyalty and heartbreak. She asked if she could visit. I said yes. When she arrived, she hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that speaks more than words ever can. We sat in the living room, talking quietly while the kids played in their room. She hesitated, then said softly, "He told me he messed up, and he doesn't know how to fix it." I nodded. She continued, "He's scared, not of you, of himself, of failing again." Her voice trembled. "He never wanted to hurt you. He just didn't know how to stay when everything felt heavy." A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it quickly. "He loves you," she whispered. I looked down at my hands, folded in my lap. Did he love me? Yes, I never doubted that. But was love enough? That was the question that quietly shaped the room. "I don't know what happens next," I said gently. "I'm healing. The kids are healing. And he needs to heal too." She nodded, even though her eyes glistened. "I just hope," she said softly, "that whatever happens, you find peace." Peace. That word echoed in me long after she left. Peace didn't require a reunion. Peace didn't demand revenge. Peace didn't ask for certainty. Peace simply wanted honesty and space and time. One night, weeks after the hospital, after the calls, after the quiet changes, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at my reflection, tired but softer, wounded but healing, shaken but steady. For the first time, I didn't see a woman abandoned. I saw a woman becoming braver, becoming clearer, becoming whole. And in that realization, something settled gently inside me. Even if he never returned, even if our story didn't find its way back to what it once was, I was finding my way back to myself, slowly, quietly, tenderly, and that was more than enough for now. The next few weeks moved in a quiet rhythm, not rushed, not forced, just steady, like gentle waves smoothing rough sand. I woke up each morning with a little more clarity, a little more breath in my chest, a little less weight pressing behind my ribs. Healing is quiet like that. It doesn't announce itself. It tiptoes in during ordinary mornings. And somewhere in those days, something inside me shifted. I stopped listening for his car. I stopped checking my phone every hour. I stopped holding my breath at sunset. Instead, I made new habits, soft ones, grounding ones. A warm cup of tea before bed, a 10-minute walk alone every evening, a moment to whisper gratitude, even on the hard days. Not gratitude for pain, but gratitude for strength. Strength I didn't know I had. One late afternoon, I found an old photo album tucked behind the bookshelf. It was the one he and I made together years ago, when love felt new, when promises were easy to believe, when we held hands without thinking. I sat on the living room floor and opened it slowly. The first pictures were of us before the children, two young adults, smiling at a world we hadn't yet learned to fear. Then the photos of our first home, our small living room, our crooked Christmas tree. And then pictures of the kids, tiny fingers, sleepy eyes, soft laughs. My heart softened and ached all at once. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I simply felt. Every memory held its own truth, some tender, some painful, some beautifully ordinary. And as I turned the pages, I realized something important. Not all love stories are meant to stay the same forever. Some change shape, some grow differently, some rest quietly in the past, even if the love itself never fully disappears. I closed the album gently, pressing my hand against its cover. Those memories would always belong to me. But the future? That was still unwritten. A few days later, he texted again. "Can we talk?" My heart fluttered, not with hope or fear, but with awareness. I typed back, "Next week works, when the kids are at school." When the day arrived, I cleaned the house slowly, not out of preparation, but to calm my nerves. When he finally knocked, I opened the door and saw him, thinner, tired, eyes searching my face for answers I didn't have. He stepped inside quietly, almost cautiously. The kids weren't home. The house was calm. Only the soft ticking of the kitchen clock accompanied us. We sat across from each other at the table, the same table where we once shared jokes, meals, decisions, worries. He looked down at his hands. "I don't know where to start," he whispered. "You can start anywhere," I said softly. He took a deep breath, one that seemed to gather months of silence. "I'm sorry." His voice shook. "I didn't mean to leave like that. I couldn't handle everything. I felt trapped, lost, like I was drowning and couldn't breathe." I listened, not to excuse him, not to accuse him, just to understand. He continued, "I should have talked to you. I should have stayed. But I thought, if I stepped away, things would get clearer. Instead, they just got worse." He looked up then, eyes glassy. "When I heard you were in the hospital, it broke something in me. I should have been there, I know that. And I'm sorry." My chest tightened, but not in the way it once had. This time, it was empathy. Gentle, steady compassion. I placed my hands flat on the table. "I was hurt," I said quietly. "I was scared. And I felt abandoned." He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I know. But," I continued softly, "I also understand you were overwhelmed, and I'm not angry anymore." His breath hitched. You're not? No, I whispered. I'm tired. I'm healing, but I'm not angry. For a long moment, we simply sat there in silence, the kind of silence that feels like a crossroads. Then he spoke again. I want to come home, he whispered, but only if you want me to, and only if it's truly what's best. I inhaled deeply. The question hung in the air like delicate glass. I don't have that answer yet, I said honestly. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I understand. And somehow, he truly did. This was not the moment for a reunion, nor was it a moment for goodbye. It was simply a moment of truth. A moment where two people finally saw each other clearly, past the anger, past the hurt, past the fear. After he left, I stood by the window watching him walk down the driveway slowly, as if each step weighed differently. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run after him. I didn't feel the need to collapse in tears. I felt steady, as if my heart had finally spoken its truth. I'm not done healing yet, and that's okay. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The sky was clear, the moon soft, the air cool. I wrapped my arms around myself, not out of fear or loneliness, but out of comfort. I whispered into the night. I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm becoming someone I'm proud of. The breeze felt like an answer, gentle, reassuring, warm. For the first time in a very long time, I felt at peace with not knowing what came next, because healing had taught me something precious. You don't need certainty to move forward. You just need truth and courage and a heart that keeps beating even after it's been broken. And mine did. It still does. The morning after he came to talk, I woke up before my alarm. Something felt different in the quiet darkness of my room, not lighter exactly, but clearer. I sat up slowly, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the distant sound of a car driving past, the rhythmic breath of my youngest asleep in the next room. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds, yet they felt like anchors, steadying me in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in months, I didn't feel suspended between hope and heartbreak. I felt present. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for him. Not for answers. Not for closure wrapped in perfect words. I was simply living. Later that morning, after dropping the kids at school, I drove to the small lake on the edge of town, the one I used to visit years ago when my mind felt too full. I parked near the water and walked toward the narrow wooden dock. The air was crisp, the lake still, the sky gray in a gentle, comforting way. I sat cross-legged at the end of the dock, watching small ripples cross the water like soft whispers. My thoughts drifted back to our conversation. His tears, his voice trembling, his apology that finally sounded real. I believed him. Maybe not enough to rebuild everything, but enough to let go of the last bits of anger I had been clinging to without realizing. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door you open slowly in your own time, and I think I had finally opened mine. Just a little, just enough. Not for him, for me. When I got home, there was a folded note slipped under the front door. I recognized his handwriting immediately. My heart didn't race this time. It simply softened. I picked it up and read it standing right there in the hallway. It said, "Thank you for hearing me. I'm giving you all the space you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk again. Even if that day never comes. Please take care of yourself. You matter more than you know." No pressure, no pleading, just quiet honesty. I pressed the note to my chest and closed my eyes. For so long, I had felt invisible, like my feelings were background noise to everyone around me. But in that moment, something healed. Not everything, not suddenly, but enough to breathe without feeling like I had to fight the air. I placed the note inside my journal and stepped into the kitchen to make tea. The kettle clicked, steam rising gently, and I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Small things, simple things. They felt meaningful again. That afternoon, I picked up the kids and took them for ice cream. They chattered in the car about school projects and recess games, their laughter filling the space that had once felt painfully silent. As I watched them eat with sticky smiles and swinging legs, I felt something deep inside me loosen. A knot I didn't even know I'd been carrying. My daughter looked up suddenly. "Mom, you're smiling different today." I blinked. "Different?" She nodded, spoon in her mouth. "Yeah, like you're happy. But quiet, happy. Quiet, happy." The words settled into my heart like a warm blanket. "Yes," I whispered. "I think I am." A few days later, he texted again. Just a simple message. "How are you feeling today?" In the past, that question would have reopened every wound, every longing, every what if. But now, it felt respectful, gentle. Just a question, nothing more. I replied, "I'm okay. One day at a time." He didn't push, didn't ask for more, just sent back, "That's all you need to do. I'm glad you're okay." And that was it. Nothing heavy, nothing tense, just kindness. And I realized then that the love between us hadn't disappeared. It had just shifted. It wasn't the desperate, clinging love that keeps people stuck. It was quieter, deeper, shaped by truth instead of fear. But I wasn't ready to decide anything about our future. Not yet. Not while my heart was still stitching itself together. One evening, I called my sister. I had avoided telling her too many details because I didn't want her judgment coloring my process. But now, I needed her voice. When she picked up, I said softly, "I talked to him." She sighed gently, not sharply. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. I hesitated. "I feel calm," I said. "And that's strange for me." She laughed lightly. "Calm is good. Calm means you're listening to yourself, not the noise." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What if I still care about him?" I whispered. "Caring is human," she replied. "But caring doesn't mean you owe yourself to someone. Caring just means your heart is open. What you choose to do with that is yours alone." I pressed my hand to my chest. "And what if he's changed?" She paused. "Then you'll see it over time," she said. "Real change doesn't rush you. Real change waits." Her words felt like soft truth settling into my bones. We hung up after a while, and I sat in the quiet living room, letting her voice echo inside me. Real change waits. That night, as I looked at the note he had left at my door, I realized something I hadn't been ready to face before. I wasn't afraid of him anymore, or of losing him, or of being alone. I wasn't afraid of my own heart. For the first time in years, I trusted myself, my pace, my process, my worth. And that trust felt like a doorway opening into a new version of my life. Not with him, not without him, just mine. A life where I was finally the main character in my own story. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I whispered to myself, "You're allowed to take this slowly. You're allowed to grow at your own speed. You're allowed to rewrite this story." And I believed it. Deeply, completely, quietly. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was fixing myself. One breath at a time, one truth at a time, one brave step at a time. And tomorrow? Tomorrow would be another step forward, whether it led toward him or away from him or somewhere entirely new. I finally knew I'd be okay, because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. I didn't plan for our final conversation. It wasn't marked on a calendar or prepared in my heart. It simply happened. In one of those soft, quiet moments when life doesn't try to be dramatic, but ends up shaping everything anyway. It was a Saturday morning. The kids were at a friend's house. The sky was pale, washed out blue. The kettle whistled gently in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table with a warm cup of tea when I heard a knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, just patient. My heart didn't jump this time. It didn't sink either. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in pockets, eyes tired, expression steady but unsure. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, and for the first time since he left, I felt strong, not stubborn, not defensive, just strong. We sat at the dining table we used to share. He stared at his hands for a long moment before whispering, "I don't want to lose you." The words didn't break me the way they might have months ago. They didn't make me cling to him or fold into old patterns. Instead, they made me breathe. Slow, deep, calm breaths. "I know," I said gently. He blinked, surprised by my tone. Maybe he expected tears, or anger, or the desperate fear of a woman begging to be chosen. But I wasn't that woman anymore. He leaned forward a little. "I want to fix this. I'm ready now." I held my mug between my palms, letting the warmth center me. "I believe you," I said. His shoulders loosened with relief. But just as quickly I added, "And I'm still not coming back." His face fell, softly, quietly, like a leaf drifting down rather than crashing. "Why?" he whispered, a question that once terrified me. But the answer rose inside me with surprising clarity. "Because I'm finally okay," I said. "And I don't want to lose that." He swallowed hard. "What about us?" I gave him a small, kind smile. "There is an us," I said. "But it's different now. It's softer, less tangled. It's full of respect, but not the life we had." He brushed a hand over his face, fighting the tremble in his voice. "I left because I was weak," he said. "I see that now." I nodded. "And I stayed alone because I was strong," I replied softly. "I see that now too." Tears finally slipped down his cheeks, but they weren't pleading tears. They were grief tears, the quiet kind that come when you recognize the truth too late. He reached out and touched the edge of my sleeve, not grabbing, not holding, just touching. One evening, I called my sister. I had avoided telling her too many details because I didn't want her judgment coloring my process. But now, I needed her voice. When she picked up, I said softly, "I talked to him." She sighed gently, not sharply. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. I hesitated. "I feel calm," I said. "And that's strange for me." She laughed lightly. "Calm is good. Calm means you're listening to yourself, not the noise." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What if I still care about him?" I whispered. "Caring is human," she replied. But caring doesn't mean you owe yourself to someone. Caring just means your heart is open. What you choose to do with that is yours alone. I pressed my hand to my chest. And what if he's changed? She paused. Then you'll see it over time, she said. Real change doesn't rush you. Real change waits. Her words felt like soft truth settling into my bones. We hung up after a while, and I sat in the quiet living room, letting her voice echo inside me. Real change waits. That night, as I looked at the note he had left at my door, I realized something I hadn't been ready to face before. I wasn't afraid of him anymore, or of losing him, or of being alone. I wasn't afraid of my own heart. For the first time in years, I trusted myself, my pace, my process, my worth. And that trust felt like a doorway opening into a new version of my life. Not with him, not without him, just mine. A life where I was finally the main character in my own story. As I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I whispered to myself, "You're allowed to take this slowly. You're allowed to grow at your own speed. You're allowed to rewrite this story." And I believed it, deeply, completely, quietly. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. Not because everything was fixed, but because I was fixing myself. One breath at a time, one truth at a time, one brave step at a time. And tomorrow? Tomorrow would be another step forward, whether it led toward him or away from him or somewhere entirely new. I finally knew I'd be okay, because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. I didn't plan for our final conversation. It wasn't marked on a calendar or prepared in my heart. It simply happened. In one of those soft, quiet moments when life doesn't try to be dramatic, but ends up shaping everything anyway. It was a Saturday morning. The kids were at a friend's house. The sky was pale, washed out blue. The kettle whistled gently in the kitchen. I was sitting at the table with a warm cup of tea when I heard a knock on the door. Not loud, not urgent, just patient. My heart didn't jump this time. It didn't sink either. I opened the door and saw him standing there, hands in pockets, eyes tired, expression steady but unsure. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, and for the first time since he left, I felt strong, not stubborn, not defensive, just strong. We sat at the dining table we used to share. He stared at his hands for a long moment before whispering, "I don't want to lose you." The words didn't break me the way they might have months ago. They didn't make me cling to him or fold into old patterns. Instead, they made me breathe. Slow, deep, calm breaths. "I know," I said gently. He blinked, surprised by my tone. Maybe he expected tears, or anger, or the desperate fear of a woman begging to be chosen. But I wasn't that woman anymore. He leaned forward a little. "I want to fix this. I'm ready now." I held my mug between my palms, letting the warmth center me. "I believe you," I said. His shoulders loosened with relief. But just as quickly I added, "And I'm still not coming back." His face fell, softly, quietly, like a leaf drifting down rather than crashing. "Why?" he whispered, a question that once terrified me. But the answer rose inside me with surprising clarity. "Because I'm finally okay," I said. "And I don't want to lose that." He swallowed hard. "What about us?" I gave him a small, kind smile. There is an us, I said. But it's different now. It's softer, less tangled. It's full of respect, but not the life we had. He brushed a hand over his face, fighting the tremble in his voice. I left because I was weak, he said. I see that now. I nodded. And I stayed alone because I was strong, I replied softly. I see that now too. Tears finally slipped down his cheeks, but they weren't pleading tears, they were grief tears, the quiet kind that come when you recognize the truth too late. He reached out and touched the edge of my sleeve, not grabbing, not holding, just touching. Do you still love me? He asked. I closed my eyes, feeling the truth settle inside me like a quiet sunrise. Yes, I said. I do. His breath caught. But I love myself more now. A long silence filled the room, the kind that doesn't choke, just settles like gentle dust on old memories. He wiped his face and nodded slowly. You're choosing peace, he whispered. I'm choosing me, I corrected softly. And then, like he understood more than he ever had before, he nodded again. I'm proud of you, he said. Those words hit harder than any apology, because they came from the version of him who finally saw me, the woman who held our family together, the woman who held herself together, the woman who learned to breathe without being someone's anchor. We stood at the door. He hesitated, then opened his arms slightly, not insisting, just offering. I stepped forward and hugged him, not as a wife, not as a betrayed woman, but as someone who once loved deeply and survived beautifully. The hug lasted longer than I expected. It was a goodbye wrapped in gratitude, not bitterness. When we pulled apart, he whispered, I hope you find someone who never leaves when you need them. I smiled. I already did, I said softly. I found myself. His eyes closed like the words stung in a good, necessary way. He walked down the steps, paused, turned back one last time. Thank you for forgiving me, he said. I had to, I replied, to move forward. And with a quiet nod, he walked away. Not dramatically, not like a movie scene, just a man letting go, and a woman rising from what remained. That night, I tucked the kids into bed. We talked, we laughed, we shared stories from our day. After they slept, I stood on the porch with a light breeze brushing against my skin. I looked up at the moon, soft, glowing, steady. It didn't shine loudly, it didn't fight to be seen. It simply existed, quiet and whole. Like me, I placed a hand over my heart and whispered, You're allowed to be happy again. And for the first time, I believed it not as hope, but as truth. A truth I earned, a truth I protected, a truth I stepped into gently, one breath at a time. The story didn't end the way I once dreamed, but it ended the way I needed, with peace, with clarity, with a woman choosing herself. And that is a beautiful ending. If my story touched your heart, if it reminded you that healing is slow but possible, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because somewhere out there, another woman is sitting in silence, wondering if she will survive the moment her world falls apart. And maybe this story will help her see that she isn't breaking, she's becoming.